In August 2022, a group of 12 hikers, led by 2 experienced guides, set out to conquer Klyuchevskaya Sopka, one of Kamchatka's most dangerous volcanoes. The climb, advertised as a thrilling adventure, quickly turned into a nightmare. Poor preparation, rushed timelines, and worsening weather set the stage for disaster. Near the summit, a fatal mistake sent 9 climbers plunging into a crevice, leaving 9 dead by the end of the ordeal. With survivors suffering frostbite and investigators uncovering troubling details about safety lapses, the tragedy exposed deep flaws in extreme tourism. What went wrong on that mountain, and could it have been avoided? The Kamchatka region in Russia's far east is like a land out of a storybook, filled with dramatic landscapes and untamed wilderness. It's surrounded by 2 great seas, the Sea of Okhotsk and the Bering Sea, and both are teeming with life. People flock here for the region's famous seafood, especially crabs and caviar. But Kamchatka's true personality lies in the fiery forces beneath its surface. This area is alive with seismic activity, home to hundreds of volcanoes, and shaped by the ever-present possibility of earthquakes. These forces make Kamchatka as dangerous as it is beautiful. Volcanoes dominate the landscape, so much so that they're proudly displayed on Kamchatka's flag and coat of arms. Out of the hundreds of volcanoes in the area, only 28 to 36 are currently active, but that's enough to have earned the region a place as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Their fiery peaks and rumbling presence remind everyone here of nature's raw power. Earthquakes are a regular part of life in Kamchatka, with most of them occurring in the seas surrounding it. But when they strike the land, the impact can be devastating. One massive earthquake back in 1959 had a magnitude of 8 and even triggered a tsunami that reached the US coast. The climate in Kamchatka varies depending on where you are. The inland areas have cold winters and warm summers, while the coasts are a bit milder, with cooler summers and less severe winters. This blend of weather and terrain makes Kamchatka a magnet for adventurers and nature lovers. Tourists come year-round to trek through its untouched reserves, soak in its natural hot springs, and explore its towering peaks and active volcanoes. For mountain climbers, Kamchatka is a dream destination, but also one that demands respect. The challenges here are as big as the mountains themselves. One volcano stands out from the rest: Klyuchevskoye, or Klyuchevskaya Sopka. It's a towering stratovolcano and one of the most active in the world. Its peak rises to around 4,750 meters, although this changes depending on its volcanic activity. This giant has been erupting since at least 1697, and its most recent eruption happened in 2021. That eruption sent lava spilling down its northwestern slope, which also happens to be one of the main routes climbers use to reach the summit. It's known as a dangerous and unpredictable path, winding through layers of volcanic rock, ice, and snow. The climb up Klyuchevskoye isn't for the faint of heart. The route begins at 800 meters and climbs nearly 5,000 meters to the summit. To make it up safely, climbers have to carefully prepare their bodies for the altitude. This means repeatedly climbing and descending to adjust to the thin air, which takes a lot of time and energy. The weather near the top is brutal, with snow, ice, and volcanic ash often blanketing the area. The ash creates an additional challenge since rescue helicopters can't fly close to the summit. Any group that gets into trouble has to rely on their own skills to make it out alive. In August 2022, a group of hikers set out to conquer Klyuchevskoye, eager to take on the challenge of one of the most treacherous peaks in the world. The group consisted of 12 people, 10 hikers, and 2 experienced guides. Among them were climbers like Anastasia Usachova and Roman Ovarian, eager adventurers, and Ivan Alabuzhin, one of the guides, a seasoned mountaineer from Barnaul. Ivan had been climbing since his teenage years and had an unmatched drive to help others face the mountains. His co-guide, Andrei Mashenko, was even more experienced, having scaled Klyuchevskoye 13 times before. The ascent began smoothly. The team moved methodically through the lower sections of the volcano, their spirits high as they marveled at the harsh beauty of Kamchatka. The air grew thinner and colder as they climbed, but the group pressed on. At 4,000 meters, however, things began to take a turn. Anastasia and Roman started showing signs of altitude sickness. Their breathing grew labored and their energy faded. Understanding the risks, Ivan made the call to take them back down to the volcanologist's hut at 3,300 meters. a simple yet critical shelter nestled on the volcanologist's pass between Klyuchevskaya Sopka and common volcanoes. Equipped with basic sleeping areas and essential supplies, the hut serves as a vital refuge for climbers and researchers battling the mountain's harsh environment. The three of them left the main group, promising to reunite after the summit attempt, as the hut offered them a safe place to recover and regain their strength. The remaining 9 climbers, led by Andrei, pushed forward, determined to reach the top. But the path ahead wasn't easy. The steep northwestern slope was covered in loose volcanic rock and patches of ice, making every step a test of balance and endurance. By the time they neared the summit, clouds were rolling in and the wind began to pick up. Despite the worsening conditions, the team stayed focused on their goal. Then disaster struck. As the group navigated a treacherous section near 4,200 meters, the ground beneath them gave way. 6 climbers fell into a deep crevice, landing on jagged rocks 30 meters below. The impact was fatal. Andrei, along with 2 others, survived the initial fall, but was severely injured. Andrei had a broken leg, while the other 2 climbers were in critical condition. Their situation quickly became dire. At the volcanologist's hut, Ivan received a distress call from Andrei. Through a poor connection, Andrei managed to describe the fall and the injuries. Ivan didn't hesitate. Grabbing tents, sleeping bags, and supplies, he began climbing back up toward the summit, knowing time was against him. His goal was to provide aid and comfort to the survivors until help could arrive. But the mountain had other plans. A snowstorm rolled in, bringing howling winds and freezing temperatures. Helicopters were grounded, unable to navigate the ash-filled air and treacherous winds. Rescue teams on foot faced an uphill battle, slowed by snow and ice that demanded careful navigation. When Ivan reached the group, he found Andrei and the 2 injured climbers clinging to life. He did everything he could to keep them warm and stable, but the storm raged on through the night, sapping their strength. The cold claimed 2 more lives before morning, leaving Andrei as the last survivor of the fall. Ivan stayed by his side, encouraging him to hold on, even as Andrei's condition worsened. By the time rescue teams began their ascent, Andrei had succumbed to his injuries, and Ivan was left alone under the summit with the weight of the tragedy on his shoulders. Realizing there was no one left to save, Ivan made the heartbreaking decision to retreat to the volcanologist's hut. The journey back down was grueling. Frostbite gnawed at his hands, feet, and face, and the storm showed no mercy. When he finally arrived at the hut, Anastasia and Roman were waiting, their faces etched with worry. Together they held on, waiting for the rescue teams to reach them. It wasn't until September 6th, 3 days after Ivan's desperate call for help, that rescuers arrived at the hut. The 3 survivors were exhausted and broken, both physically and emotionally. Ivan's frostbite was severe, and the toll of the ordeal was written all over his face. The rescuers worked quickly to get them off the mountain, but retrieving the bodies of the fallen climbers proved much harder. The conditions near the summit remained treacherous, with ash clouds, falling rocks, and icy slopes complicating the recovery efforts. As the survivors made their way down, news of the tragedy began to spread. Families of the climbers waited anxiously for updates, desperate to know who had survived and who hadn't. For many, the uncertainty was unbearable. Among them was Andrei's sister, who described him as a kind and compassionate man. He had once worked as a train driver before discovering his passion for climbing and becoming a guide. Andrei's expertise and love for the mountains had been unmatched, making his loss all the more devastating. The climbers had been well prepared for their journey, but Klyuchevskoya's unpredictable nature proved too great. The storm, the terrain, and the unrelenting cold had conspired against them, turning their dream of reaching the summit into a nightmare. By the time the rescue operation was complete, the death toll had risen to 8. As the investigation into the tragedy unfolded, troubling details about the events leading up to the ill-fated climb began to emerge. It all started with an advertisement. The Extreme Time Travel Club, based in Novosibirsk, promoted their tours with enticing descriptions of adventure. Among their offerings was a climb to the peak of Klyuchevskaya Sopka, one of Kamchatka's most dangerous volcanoes. Priced between 72,000 and 80,000 rubles, the trip promised thrill seekers an experience of a lifetime. On their website, the company highlighted the expertise of their guides, featuring profiles designed to inspire confidence. Andrei Mishenko, one of the guides, had a glowing reputation. He began his mountaineering journey in 2001 during military service in the Caucasus, and over time, climbing became his life's passion. With over 5 years as a guide for the Extreme Time Travel Club, Andriy had earned the respect of many for his skill and his ability to inspire a love for the mountains in others. His colleague, Ivan Alabujin, was equally experienced, with 8 years in the club and a resume that included guiding treks in places like Nepal, Turkey, and the Altai region. Together, they seemed like a solid team to lead the climb. The climbers who signed up for the trip came from across Russia, hailing from Moscow, Novosibirsk, Kamchatka, and other regions. They were drawn to the challenge of Klyuchevskaya Sopka, excited for the chance to conquer one of the world's most active volcanoes. However, there was one major issue. The group had never climbed together before. In mountaineering, familiarity and teamwork can be the difference between success and disaster. Teams that know each other's strengths and pace have a better chance of overcoming obstacles. This group, meeting for the first time at the base of the volcano, lacked that connection. The climb started with an acclimatization period, during which the group adjusted to the altitude. This step is crucial for any high-altitude ascent, as it allows the body to adapt to thinner air. But even this part of the journey had complications. The climbers were on a tight schedule, hoping to complete the climb and return home by September 9th, as many had already booked their return flights. This urgency created pressure to move quickly, cutting short the time needed for proper acclimatization. 2 climbers, Anastasia Usachova and Roman Ovarian, struggled with altitude sickness as the group ascended past 4,000 meters. The guides made the decision to split the team, with Ivan leading the sick climbers back down to the volcanologist's hut at 3,300 meters. Andriy continued toward the summit with the remaining 8 climbers, but this decision left only one guide for the final leg of the journey, a critical misstep given the conditions. Another major issue came to light during the investigation. The group's use of a rope for safety was flawed. Typically, roped climbing involves securing the rope to the terrain using hooks or anchors. This method ensures that if one climber slips, the others can stop the fall. In this case, the group was roped together but without any anchoring. This meant that if one person fell, the entire group was at risk of being dragged down. Proper roping techniques, including the use of ice axes and hooks, were either not implemented or failed during the climb. The tragedy was compounded by the weather. The climbers were aware that a snowstorm was on the horizon, but they pressed on, likely trying to stick to their schedule. The storm struck shortly after the group fell into the crevice. Strong winds, icy slopes, and freezing temperatures made rescue efforts nearly impossible. Helicopters were grounded, and rescue teams on foot were slowed by the treacherous conditions. Investigations into the company behind the climb raised more questions. Extreme Time Travel Club, like many adventure tourism companies, operated in a largely unregulated industry. While their guides were experienced, there was no standardized training or certification process to ensure safety. In Russia, it's possible to obtain a mountain guide certificate for as little as 5,000 rubles, with some private centers offering minimal training. This lack of oversight creates a dangerous environment where even small mistakes can lead to catastrophic outcomes. The climbers' deaths highlighted systemic issues in the extreme tourism industry. Mountaineering experts pointed to the rushed schedule, improper roping techniques, and lack of acclimatization as critical factors in the disaster. Additionally, the decision to leave Andriy as the sole guide for 8 climbers was a significant oversight. While Andriy and Ivan were experienced, they were not invincible. The harsh conditions of Klyuchevskaya Sopka pushed even their skills to the limit. In the wake of the tragedy, law enforcement took action. The head of Extreme Time Travel Club, Andrei Stepanov, was arrested, and charges of manslaughter were filed against both him and Ivan Alabujin. The case sparked heated debates within the mountaineering community. Some argued that the guides were directly responsible for the climbers' deaths due to negligence, while others believed that the conditions and the inherent risks of mountaineering were to blame. Experienced climbers like Alexander Odintsov, a Soviet and Russian mountaineering champion, criticized the use of unanchored ropes, calling it a grave error. He emphasized that roping a group together without proper precautions was a recipe for disaster. Others, like Roman Abelayev, a respected mountaineer, defended the guides, pointing to their experience and the challenges of the situation. Andrei Mishenko, in particular, was known for his expertise on Klyuchevskaya Sopka, having climbed it more than 10 times, a record few local guides could match. The tragedy also reignited calls for better regulation of extreme tourism in Russia. Proposals for stricter training standards, certification requirements, and oversight of adventure tourism companies were discussed at both regional and federal levels. Advocates argued that without these measures, similar disasters would continue to occur. For Ivan Alabugin, the memories of that day will likely haunt him forever. Watching his teammates die, one after another, in such a harsh and unforgiving environment, is a burden no judicial punishment could match. Alabugin, an experienced guide, was at the center of the tragedy, risking his own life to provide aid in unimaginable conditions. Despite his efforts to save those stranded near the summit, the severe injuries, freezing temperatures, and relentless snowstorm proved insurmountable. In the months following the disaster, Alabugin faced legal repercussions. Kamchatka investigators detained him, accusing him of providing services that do not meet the requirements of safety of life and health, which resulted in the death of several people. But Alabugin's wife defended his actions, insisting that her husband did everything possible and impossible to help during the tragedy. The survivors of the climb have yet to share their full accounts, but their testimony could shed light on the final moments of that doomed expedition, and perhaps reveal whether this tragic loss was avoidable.